Hello, and welcome to today's exploration of the English Reformation, a period that fundamentally reshaped the religious and political landscape of England. I'm fascinated by this era, not just for its theological debates, but for the way it intertwines with the personal ambitions and political machinations of the Tudor dynasty. As we delve into this complex tapestry of events, we'll see how what began as a matter of royal matrimony evolved into a seismic shift in English society and beyond. Now, before we dive in, it's crucial to understand that the English Reformation wasn't a single clean break from Rome, but rather a series of events spanning decades. It's a story of gradual change, punctuated by moments of dramatic upheaval. We'll be tracing this journey from its roots in the reign of Henry VIII through to the Elizabethan settlement, examining how each monarch left their mark on the evolving Church of England. Let's begin with Henry VIII, the monarch whose marital troubles sparked the initial break with Rome. When I think of Henry, I'm always struck by the irony that a man once hailed as a defender of the faith for his opposition to Martin Luther would become the architect of England's split from the Catholic Church. It's a testament to how personal desires can shape the course of history. The crux of the matter was Henry's desperate need for a male heir. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon had produced only a daughter, Mary, and Henry became convinced that this was divine punishment for marrying his brother's widow. His solution? Annul the marriage and wed Anne Boleyn, a charismatic and ambitious woman who had caught his eye. But here's where things get complicated. Pope Clement VII, under pressure from Catherine's nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, refused to grant the annulment. This refusal set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the religious landscape of England. Henry, never one to take no for an answer, decided to take matters into his own hands. I will have the obedience of my subjects both in things temporal and spiritual. The years between 1529 and 1536 saw a flurry of legislative activity that we now call the Reformation Parliament. This period fascinates me because it shows how Henry and his advisors, particularly Thomas Cromwell, used the existing political structures to achieve their aims. They didn't just bulldoze through opposition, they carefully constructed a legal framework for the break with Rome. The key piece of legislation was the Act of Supremacy in 1534, which declared Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. This wasn't just a theological statement, it was a fundamental restructuring of power in England. The monarch now held ultimate authority in both spiritual and temporal matters. It's hard to overstate how radical this was at the time. But Henry's Reformation wasn't just about high politics. It had profound effects on everyday life in England. The dissolution of the monasteries, which began in 1536, was particularly impactful. Monasteries had been centres of learning, charity and healthcare for centuries. Their closure left a void in many communities that took generations to fill. It also redistributed vast amounts of land and wealth, creating a new class of landed gentry loyal to the crown. The abbeys of England, Wales and Ireland, overthrown, demolished and abandoned to ruin, are a dismal spectacle to the curious traveller. When Henry VIII died in 1547, he left behind a church that was, in many ways, still Catholic in all but name. It was during the reign of his young son, Edward VI, that the real theological shifts began to take place. Under the guidance of his Protestant regents, particularly his uncle Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, England moved decisively towards Protestantism. One of the most significant changes was the introduction of the Book of Common Prayer in 1549. This was more than just a new prayer book. It was a fundamental reimagining of how English people would worship. Services were now in English rather than Latin, making them accessible to the common people. The theology behind the prayers was decidedly Protestant, emphasising justification by faith alone. But these changes weren't universally popular. The prayer book rebellion in the West Country showed that many people were deeply attached to traditional Catholic practices. It's a reminder that while we often focus on the decisions of monarchs and theologians, the Reformation was also a grassroots phenomenon that affected ordinary people's daily lives in profound ways. We will have the Mass in Latin, as was before, and celebrated by the priest without any man or woman communicating with him. The accession of Mary I in 1553 brought yet another dramatic shift in England's religious landscape. Mary, a devout Catholic, was determined to undo her father's and brother's reforms and return England to the Catholic fold. Her reign is often remembered for the persecution of Protestants, earning her the sobriquet Bloody Mary. But I think it's important to understand her actions in context. Mary's restoration of Catholicism was initially cautious. She understood the need to build consensus and avoid provoking Protestant opposition. However, as her reign progressed, her policies became more forceful. The burning of Protestant heretics, including Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, was a shocking return to medieval methods of enforcing religious orthodoxy. Despite the violence, Mary's reign saw genuine attempts to revitalise English Catholicism. Under the guidance of Cardinal Reginald Pole, there were efforts to improve clerical education and reform church practices. However, these efforts were cut short by Mary's early death in 1558, leaving her Catholic restoration incomplete and vulnerable. I have been to the fire and have seen them light the faggots, and have seen the young man burn, and have seen him die, and I tell you, sir, it was a sight to make a man weep. The accession of Elizabeth I in 1558 marked the beginning of what we now call the Elizabethan settlement. Elizabeth's approach to religion was pragmatic rather than dogmatic. She sought to find a middle way that could accommodate both Catholic and Protestant elements within a single national church. The Act of Supremacy and the Act of Uniformity, both passed in 1559, were the cornerstones of this settlement. Elizabeth was declared Supreme Governor of the Church of England, a slightly less contentious title than her father's Supreme Head. The 1559 Book of Common Prayer, meanwhile, sought to strike a balance between Protestant and Catholic sensibilities. Elizabeth's religious policy was not without its critics. Puritans felt it didn't go far enough in reforming the Church, while Catholics saw it as heretical. The Queen's response to these challenges was to focus on outward conformity rather than inward belief. As long as people attended Church of England services and didn't openly challenge the established order, they were generally left alone. I have no desire to make windows into men's souls. As we reach the end of our journey through the English Reformation, it's worth reflecting on its long-term impact. The changes set in motion during this period fundamentally altered the religious, political and social fabric of England. The Church of England, with its unique blend of Catholic and Protestant elements, became a defining feature of English identity. But the Reformation's effects weren't limited to religion. The dissolution of the monasteries led to a redistribution of wealth and land that had profound economic consequences. The rise of Puritanism in the late 16th and early 17th centuries would play a crucial role in the English Civil War and the development of English political thought. Perhaps most significantly, the Reformation established the principle of the monarch as the head of both church and state, a concept that continues to shape British constitutional arrangements to this day. As we conclude, I'm struck by how a period of such tumultuous change has left such an enduring legacy. The English Reformation wasn't just a historical event, it was the birth of modern England. The Reformation was the crucible in which the modern British state was founded. I hope this exploration of the English Reformation has given you a deeper understanding of this pivotal period in history. As always, your engagement with these videos means a great deal to me. If you found this content enlightening, please consider leaving a like or a comment. Your support truly does make a difference in allowing me to continue producing these in-depth historical analyses. And if there are other aspects of English or European history you'd like me to delve into in future episodes, I'm always eager to hear your suggestions. Until next time, thank you for joining me on this historical journey.